I can't even imagine. Have you heard those words and thought to yourself, neither can I? But it happened. You lived it. But most importantly, you survived it. We hear you, we see you, and we're here to talk about it. We're two moms, lifelong best friends, and we've both experienced traumatic, life-altering events involving our children. So, the last episode that we put out was fucking hilarious.
Thanks.
Did not expect that. I know you had kind of talked about the idea of doing it, but I thought, she's going to be too exhausted. She's got too much on her plate. She's not going to do it. And you're like, I'll check this out.
The 2024 wrap up.
Yes.
Yeah.
So super funny. And it got me thinking because earlier that day, and you did take a piece of this, or not that day, but the last time we had recorded when we did some banter, we were kind of going down memory lane of college.
Yeah.
And I know that we were kind of like scrapped for time. So how this topic didn't come up was kind of beyond me. But going down memory lane in college, how we did not talk about fucking Brian.
Fucking Brian.
Fucking Brian. So there was this guy that had an interest in Victoria named Brian. And they met in your biology class, right?
Yes, but it was, let me just back up and say it was a very friendly interest.
Right.
At first it was, I mean, there wasn't really, we didn't really like date or anything, but it was a very friendly interest. Mm-hmm. We were friends. It was 3 of us in the class and we would just talk back and forth, but he lived off campus. So I was like, you can come to my dorm and study. Let's like study together. Because it was, it was college biology. It was something in the biology, something.
Yeah, this was what, like freshman year?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at that time in college, we that was when Dane Cook, a comedian, was kind of like in his heyday.
Yes.
And he had this one particular special out where he talks about the friend that nobody likes.
Yep.
And if you don't think that you're that friend, chances are you are that friend.
That's correct.
Because everybody's talking shit about you behind your back, right? So this Brian became the subject of this whole comedy stand-up because in the comedy stand-up, he calls him, his name is Brian.
Right.
He has this whole story about the friend that nobody likes and his name is fucking Brian.
Right.
So Brian was totally cool. He was fine. He was coming around. He was hanging out in our like friend group. You know, Victoria and I lived together in the dorms and, you know, we had people over pretty often. And we noticed something about Brian. The more that he would hang out, he really just made himself at home.
Oh, he would walk right in.
And
eat all my fucking applesauce.
All of the applesauce. And this really chapped Victoria's ass,
Dude,
as
listen,
she would say.
I'm on a college budget, and I buy applesauce in like vats. Unsweetened applesauce. I don't know what it is about the unsweetened apples. I love it. I could eat it in vats today.
Just pour the whole jar in your face.
I loved it.
Yeah.
Loved it. And then you could reuse those jars, those glass jars, for anything you want. But this motherfucker would come in and just spoon feed himself out of the jar.
With the dirty spoon.
My applesauce.
And then put it back.
Yes. And so it got to a point where I had to leave notes on my applesauce. You know, stay out, fucking Brian. Stay out of my applesauce.
Yeah.
Drink the beer. Just don't eat my applesauce.
Right. Not asking a lot.
That's right.
So it became a running joke. You know, this Brian became fucking Brian. And then one day, I was leaving to go somewhere. Mm-hmm. And I pulled out of the parking space and I start to drive through the parking lot. And out of nowhere, a human being comes darting out on a skateboard between cars without looking, doesn't stop. And I literally hit this person with my car.
Yep.
I hit a person with my car. Not many people can say that. I literally hit a person with my car.
You called me. I hit a person with my car. What do I do?
Okay. And this person, not only did I hit them with my car because they didn't stop on their skateboard, they flipped over my car like something you would see in the movies and landed on their fucking feet. Mm-hmm. And I get out in a panic. They smashed my windshield.
With his
with their body, right?
Right.
I'm completely devastated. I don't know what just happened. I get out and I look and it's fucking Brian.
Yeah. Fine as can be.
Fine as a fiddle. Perfectly, not a scratch on him. And I call Victoria and I'm like, you're not going to believe this shit. I fucking hit Brian, of all people. I'm so thankful that it was him, by the way.
Yeah.
I hit Brian with my car. And you're like, what?
Because he's from California and he's just like chill.
He was like,
it's all good, dude.
Oh, yeah. I'm just going to keep on skating. Like, he probably... He got back on his skate. I'm like, why did you stop? What the fuck? What the hell just happened? I literally hit you. So, you know, lo and behold, I ended up having to get my windshield fixed and probably lied about it to some company at the time. to say that it was a football or some shit that hit my windshield and not a human.
Not a human
But
being.
this was like
hip.
he was totally fine. Like I didn't get sued. You know, I'm so fucking lucky. But that it was fucking Brian. I don't even think I told my parents about that.
Right.
Like,
no. We were like 18, 19. Why would you tell your parents about that? We got this. We're adults now.
I hit a person.
I know.
I feel bad when I hit an animal.
I've done that. Oh my God. I hit this dog, dude.
Oh no.
I was leaving an Airbnb and it was like dusk and I was going down this long road and I saw this thing in the grass on the right-hand side, but it was almost like tumbleweedy, like it was kind of blowing in the wind. So I thought maybe it was a bag or something, but there's nobody on the road next to me. Everything was fine. And all of a sudden this car on my left comes speeding up next to me and I'm getting closer to this thing. And as soon as I noticed what it was, it darted out in front of my car. Dude, I saw it and I can still see it in my mind. It was the tiniest, fluffiest little white dog with a blue bow on its head. It's weird how the vision and the memory pick something up, but like after the fact. Because it just... And I made the biggest mistake of looking in my rearview mirror.
Oh.
I screamed like bloody. I'm so sorry. And I'm crying and I'm like, how do I turn around? Because it wasn't like I could get into the other lane. And it's dusk at this point. It was so, it came out at my car there was probably 10 feet. There's no way I'm going 60 miles an hour.
Right.
On a long road.
Right.
It's over for this thing. And I'm like picturing in my head these little like 7-year-old kids just tacking up little, missing posters of their little Fluffy. Oh, no. And I just mowed it down, dude. It was the saddest thing. It was horrible.
How long ago was this?
2 or 3 years ago.
Oh, really? Oh, man. It's still pretty fresh.
Horrible.
And you feel
screamed.
And you feel so much more worse about that than I did about hitting Brian.
It was fucking Brian.
It was fucking Brian. But I was like, it's fucking karma coming at you for being an ass.
Like, for eating applesauce.
Stop eating the applesauce, you dingus. Today we welcome Bailey Susage, female leadership development consultant and mother of one special little girl named Mila. Welcome, Bailey. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's so lovely to have you in the studio. We like it when people come in studio.
Well, it's way more fun.
Oh, yeah.
Better energy.
Yes, true, absolutely. So tell us about Mila.
All right. So when I was pregnant with Mila, around 36 weeks, they started to think she was small, on the smaller side. So we monitored for the next couple weeks, and then at 38 weeks, they induced me, and they figured that she would be a feeder and a grower is what they called it. And when she was born just under 4 pounds. And immediately taken to the NICU. And we really didn't know what was wrong. And they kind of started looking at everything, my placenta, if I, what was going on with me. But I was completely fine. The placenta was at an average size. So they started doing a lot of testing on Mila and coming back to us with some really scary things without even knowing if that was conclusive. I remember... Mila was hours as far as being born, and they were telling us she could possibly have Turner syndrome. And my husband and I sitting in the hospital room with both of our parents outside, like waiting to see us and to see their new grandchild. And my husband and I just crying because we had no idea. They told us that Mila will be intellectually delayed. She will never live a normal life, that they weren't sure what was going on, but these were certainties.
Wow.
And as a new mom,
right.
Our first child and a new parent, it's a lot to take in.
And nothing was like picked up on ultrasounds. I mean, I know her size was off, but nothing was picked up on ultrasounds at all?
No, and we did the genetic testing at 5 months and everything came back completely fine.
Interesting. That's weird.
Yeah.
Like, she just stopped developing like after a certain point?
They honestly, they don't know, because looking at the measurement of the spine, everything was completely fine. And I had a feeling she was small even earlier in my pregnancies, because there was a couple women who I worked with who were pregnant right at the same time, and you could see like the elbow in their belly or the hand or the foot, and like you could never really see Mila in my belly at all. So I kind of had this feeling she was small, but we obviously didn't know it would go in this direction.
Right. I'm surprised they would take her early, too.
That's what I was
knowing-
thinking also. That was
Yeah.
going to be my question. Go
Why
ahead.
would they want to take her early if she was so small? They
Yeah.
would want to give her a little bit more time to cook.
Yeah.
You know?
A lot of unknowns.
Yeah.
So we spent the first year. So she spent about 17 days in the NICU. And when they sent us home, we were doing blood work every week. Like, one of the big things at that time is she had something called high AFP, and that's alpha fetal protein. And your alpha fetal protein, as you may know, is related to tumors. And so when you're creating a baby in your belly, the mom has a higher level of AFP, and so does the baby, because it's creating all the organs. And once the baby's born, the mom and the baby flush out all of the things that were not needed to grow, to do anything more, because it's developed everything it needs to develop. So when you have a high AFP, that could mean that there's additional growth, aka tumors, cancer. So we're testing every week for months upon months and looking at this AFP, which you're supposed to be between I think at this point now I'm forgetting things, but like between a 1 and a 10. Mila's at like 30,000.
Wow.
And we were doing ultrasounds on her belly, on her head, on her chest, kind of all over her body every couple months. And finally, after, I don't know, maybe 6 months or something of having her have blood work every single week, I was like, this is not giving us any information.
Right.
All we're doing is pricking her.
Yep.
So let's move this to once a month. And, now let's move this to every 3 months and stuff. So, throughout Mila's journey, I, of course, have learned a lot of things, but part of it is, learning how to be an advocate when you're receiving all of this information and processing it.
And they didn't have like a protocol because they had no idea what was going on with
No.
her, right? So it's not like they could have said, well, this is how we're treating her. We're just going to throw things out there and see what sticks, right? Like,
Right.
That's got to be ultra frustrating too.
Yeah. So at a year, they did a full body x-ray because they wanted to look for anything genetics with her bones. And they found out that she had hip dysplasia. Meanwhile, my husband and I had taken her to an orthopedic doctor just a couple months prior to get her hips checked, and she was clear. And it was one of those appointments where we're like, oh, we finally had a win, yay for us. And then a couple months later, they're like, no, she has hip dysplasia.
And what is that?
So it's when the hip is not completely, and the socket hasn't completely developed. So they were able to do something called a closed reduction. And it's just moving the socket in, or moving the hip back into the socket. And then they put them in a spica cast, which is a full body cast. It's from her chest all the way down one leg and halfway down another leg. And it's a cast of what you think of it, a hard cast.
Yeah.
And it's horrible. My baby is 14 months old, and we're just moving her around the place because she cannot move on her own. And she had to wear that for 5 months. She had it replaced halfway through because, there's an opening for the diaper, but things still get up there and stuff. So from a sanitation perspective, they have to change it out, but that requires surgery. And so we got that off at, I guess when she was about 18 months, 19 months. And then we went for her 3-month checkup, and I had noticed that her spine was curving. And so we're about to leave the appointment with the orthopedic surgeon saying her hip looks good, we're on the right track and stuff. And I said, can you take a look at her spine? And my husband's like, no, like we're okay. And comes back in, looks at her spine. They do some x-rays and find out she has scoliosis and kyphosis. And
What's the difference between the two?
Yeah, so scoliosis is your S curve, and your kyphosis is when it comes into a C curve and it comes out. So almost looking like a hump on your back.
Okay.
So she had both. And it's really rare for a child to have what they call like infantile scoliosis and kyphosis. So they start either casting right away or bracing. So we went the bracing route that was recommended from our doctor. And it's not to cure, and I'm not using that term loosely. Like, it's not at all to cure. It's to slow the development of the curves down. So we're, and at that time, right, so all of this is coming back. At that time, Mila stopped eating right at 1. So she just stopped eating any types of food. So at the same time we're going through the hip dysplasia, I'm trying to find an eating clinic to put her into eating therapy. And when somebody says that a child or anybody will eat when they're hungry, have a child who doesn't eat.
Right.
That's just not the case.
Right.
And I don't know if Mila just didn't feel hunger or what, but she just would have never eaten again. So put her through eating therapy, doing these surgeries, then finding out that she has scoliosis and kyphosis. Kind of feels like the hits keep coming.
Were you able to at least get anything into her, even like a toddler formula or something that would get her some kind of nutrients?
Yeah, so we did. We gave her lots of yogurt that we fortified and did that as much as possible. She eventually did graduate from the eating program, and they were wonderful. But whatever problem or whatever challenge Mila has with that, it still exists to this day. So I don't know if it's genetic. I don't know, just from a cellular perspective, something isn't firing correctly to make her want to crave food and nutrition.
Yeah.
Did you ever have to go like the like a G-tube route? Or
She
anything?
she has one now. She got one when she was 4. So we did the bracing, and I started looking around for additional orthopedic surgeons. We were in Baltimore, so we had Hopkins, kind of the number one place you can go, but I just wasn't thrilled with everything. So I started looking around, and I was able to meet with, because then enter COVID, I was able to meet with the top 8 out of the top 10 orthopedic surgeons in the U.S., like in person / by video when COVID happened. So I landed on the Paley Institute, which is in West Palm Beach, and Dr. Feldman, he was a doctor from New York and then came there as the spinal specialist. And I just fell in love with him. He looked at Mila as a whole child and looked at her as we're going to tackle all these things together. And so he, of course, wanted to put off spine surgery for as long as possible, because the earlier you start messing with the spine, the more problems you can have.
And I've heard that too from people who've had spine surgery. They end up having multiple spine surgeries.
Yes. So, we did the bracing thing. Every time we went to an appointment at the Paley Institute, it was like a completely stressful thing. Not because of Dr. Feldman, but because of the news just wasn't great. Yeah. And then we moved down to Florida, and in 2021, and about 3 months after we moved here, Mila had a cough that wouldn't go away. So despite all of what we call Mila's complexities, she's never really sick. And she had this cough that wouldn't go away, and she finally, we took her to the doctor, gave her a nebulizer. She ends up in the ER. 2 days later, her lung collapsed. So she's 4 years old, just over 4 years old, and we end up spending 3 months in the PICU, walking out of there with a G-tube, like you said earlier, a trach, a vent, just a completely different life than what we walked in there with. We knew Mila was probably operating at a lower capacity of breathing because one of the things that they were trying to do when they were trying to decide whether to intubate her or not is they checked her CO2 levels, and her CO2 levels were like in the 80s, and anybody in the 80s would have been passed out, whereas
Right.
Mila's like chit-chatting with us and, you know,
So her
awake.
baseline is lower than the average person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So prior to the lung collapsing, how was her? I mean, I know that her development was different than the average child, but how was her development in your eyes? Like, where was she?
Yeah, I mean, her development was different physically because her spine curved, you know, so it kind of inhibited some of the things that she was able to do physically. But I never liked, or would allow people to use the term delayed, because if Mila's spine didn't have curves in it, then that wouldn't be an issue. You know, she would have been reaching certain milestones. So for me, this was something of like, well, like, let's help her body function properly. And, you know, and then and the development will come with it. And intellectually, she was always amazing. She did have speech delays, so she was in speech therapy, but I taught her sign language at an early age. That was one of my degrees. And she was like almost fluent in sign.
Hold up, love that.
So-
We love sign language.
Love it.
It's such a beautiful language, and I think if you are a visual person, it can be easier for you to be able to adapt and stuff to it. I love it. I mean, Mila and I will still use some signs here and there. She was in the hospital for those 3 months, and it was terrible. She was never alone, not one time. Between my husband, myself, my parents, and my in-laws, somebody was always with her day and night.
That was how I was for 2 months. We were in the hospital. I was always with her. Somebody was with her.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine my 4-year-old waking up and not having somebody she recognized.
Did you notice other parents couldn't be there? Did you see that a lot? I did
broke
too.
my heart.
Me too.
And no judgment, because
Totally.
you know, I think
What if
they
you're a
have
single
other
mom?
Kids. Right? They
Yeah.
have other kids. They work an hourly position and stuff. I mean, it's absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So it's certainly a privilege that we were able to provide that for Mila. And so when Mila was intubated, you know, they told us that they, you know, they're heavily sedated and stuff to make them comfortable. And so to really not expect much out of her. And one of the PICU doctors said, I had one, you know, he's been a PICU doctor for, I think, decades. And he's like, I've had one patient that was up, you know, coloring and watching TV and stuff. And Craig looked at him and he said, that'll be Mila. And I was so distraught. I was like, that's absolutely not going to be
While
Mila.
they're intubated?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And a couple of days later, lo and behold, Mila's sitting up, watching things, painting her nails. Like at one point, she was putting lipstick on her lips, which was going all over the tubes, which looked like blood because it was red lipstick. And you know, we had to like warn the nurses because it's all over the tape and everything.
And she wasn't uncomfortable with that in? I imagine at first she probably was like, what, when she started waking up, like, what is this?
Yeah. She was, and we tried everything. We extubated her right before Christmas, so taking the intubation out and to see if she was able to breathe on her own. And unfortunately, like after days and days, they had what she called little reserves. So kind of back to the whole eating thing, Mila never ate a lot. So, you know, she was 4 years old and she was like 13 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, she's a petite individual to begin with and stuff, but you know, she was losing weight. We weren't really seeing that and stuff. And of course, breathing, I didn't know this, breathing takes a lot of calories and stuff, especially at that age. So, you know, she had very little like fat reserves to kind of help her in the healing. So they tried everything they could after they extubated her. You know, even I remember them putting this mask on and it like a CPAP mask basically, and then this horrible smelling gas to help the lungs. And she just smelled like her hair, her skin, everything. It was just so devastating. And when I think about those memories, that was one memory that it took me a really long time to think about again. Like it was such a hard, every time I went to unlock that door, I had to shut it again because it just was too difficult.
Well, something about smells will bring you right back, right?
Yes.
Just, just in general.
Yes.
And then you can probably still smell it.
Yes.
So, and that just makes it even, harder to process later.
Right.
Yeah.
More real.
Yeah.
So they had to intubate her again. And then once they intubated her again, they brought us to the table to call us for a meeting to say that, they wanted to put in a trach. And, it's obviously a world that we knew nothing about. And, at this point, Mila had been there for probably about a month and a half. So we knew the staff very well and all the nurses, all the doctors, all the RTs and stuff. So, the people who had kind of continuously worked with us were in that meeting, and my niece was there. My niece, she's 25 now. She lived with us when she was in college, and she's Mila's best friend, and Craig's my best friend as well. And so really, we call ourselves the Core Four. And
That's
so
cute.
yeah, it's really cute. And so when we sat there for the meeting, my parents were there as well, but kind of when everybody left and just a few of the doctors, it was Craig, Sydney, and I who stayed there to have kind of deeper conversations and stuff. And I remember looking over at the doctor and saying the statement that I knew my husband couldn't. Is this worth doing? Is she going to survive? And he looked at me and said, we'd be having a very different conversation if I didn't think so.
Okay.
But I had to, it took everything in my soul to ask if my child was going to live.
Yeah.
But I knew I couldn't put her through another surgery, because they're doing procedure after procedure at this point with her.
And it's got to be so frustrating to not know what you're working with.
Yeah.
Right. Just taking the hits as they come.
Right. And your cortisol level is so high, you're not thinking straight, and just your stress level.
When you have a diagnosis, typically you're given options.
And you can research and Google, and Google will scare the shit out of you and all those things, but you've got none of that.
No, we're just making these decisions on the fly with her. And I mean, the point of that meeting was to allow us to absorb the information, of course, but it's not like, we can wait, a month while you figure this out in your heart and stuff.
And this is prior to her spine surgery.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and even, the doctor who had said this about a different conversation, he said, you had the intuition that something was wrong, because when we took her to the doctor initially, they said, you can take her home or you can take her to the emergency room. I said, we need to take her to the emergency room. So he's like, you had the intuition that something was wrong then. You've had the intuition that we needed to intubate her again, because when they intubated her the second time, they wanted to do it soon because it was Christmas and you don't have full staff and stuff. And I was like, okay, we need to do it. So he's like, one thing I am never going to be able to explain to you with science is a mother's intuition. So what do you think we should be doing? And
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
rare.
Yeah. Whether he really, really meant that or not, I did appreciate that agency and I appreciated that perspective of it. So, my husband and I had a lot of conversations and stuff, and we decided to do the trach. And then she was in the hospital until she came home on Valentine's Day, 2022, which I think is somewhat symbolic. I don't know. Just out of all
Love
the
day.
days.
Yeah. Love day.
So, we really just spent the next number of months surviving, to be honest with you. We walked into we were renting an apartment at the time because we had just moved down here, and all of the supplies were sent over from the DME company. And there's 15 boxes of supplies. I have no idea what any of these things are. And trying to organize this stuff. And now we've come home. We have a ventilator. We have a suction machine. We have a food pump. We have a nebulizer machine. We have all of this equipment that I don't know how. They've trained us in the hospital, but ultimately I don't know how to use, and kind of, learning. And we have a home health nurse who is there, and And the DME company, Durable Medical Equipment Company, sends their RT out to, be with you for a bit and work with you and stuff. So it's not like we're just like laughed up to our own devices, but still it's like really, really scary. And Mila was really sick for a good number of months when she came home. We were venting her G tube, which essentially means like letting air and bile out of her. She was being suctioned all the time to get phlegm or mucus out of her lungs. She was on the vent all the time, just taking her out for a walk for 10 minutes. She was on a pulse ox all the time because we were monitoring her oxygen. It was to take this 13, 14 pound child in a buggy, in a wagon. The equipment weighed probably 4 times as much as she did.
At least,
yeah. And at that point, we had a vent that was about 25 pounds. Now her vent is maybe 4 and stuff. So, and this equipment looks scary, like really scary, very industrial and stuff. So
No fun colors.
Oh, yeah, super gray and black. Yeah. Yep.
You should get into that business, like decorating, bedazzle people's medical equipment.
Right.
Because especially for little kids, it makes it more, not exciting, but it just not so sterile.
Yeah. Well, one of the first things I did when we moved into our current house, so we came home in February, we moved into our house in May, is I dehospitalized her room. So I took the vent off the vent stand and put it on a really pretty pedestal table. And then I got another stool to put the humidifier on, and, everything's safe and connected. Like obviously safety is our first concern and stuff. And I made sure all the wires were like Velcroed up underneath the bed so they weren't just laying out. Right. And we put things away when we're not using it. Like we don't need to have the pulse ox machine out all day when she's not on it and stuff. So, I try to make her room look as much of now she's 7, a 7-year-old. She deserves that. She doesn't deserve to be in a medical room at home. So, so we were home like, we went to a doctor's appointment in West Palm for her orthopedic surgeon in December. So that was almost a year, about 10 months after we had gotten home. And I knew she had to have spine surgery. Like I knew all of this was a Band-Aid and that we had to have spine surgery. And in fact, I made an appointment with a doctor in Atlanta because if Dr. Feldman wasn't going to do it, I was going to get somebody to do it. And they did the x-rays and he looked at us and his literal words were, "This is not sustainable for existence anymore."
Wow.
And, how do you process that information that her organs will just shut down? She essentially was bent over with her spine.
Wow.
So they got us in kind of ASAP in April. So about 4 months later.
That's ASAP if it's not sustainable for existence. That's in the medical community. That's ASAP.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's nuts.
Well, and this is to go into a halo. It's it has to be very methodical.
Sure.
So I think that's why. So we packed up and had rented an Airbnb for 2 months to live over on the East Coast. And what a halo does is it was literally the thing I had been scared about since her initial diagnosis because it looks so archaic. So they put pins into your skull and then you have a metal piece that goes around it, and then they attach weights, and the weights essentially pull your neck up and your spine down.
Okay.
So, I think I know what you're talking about now.
So when you have severe scoliosis and kyphosis, you can't simply just go into surgery and try to straighten out a spine because that can be really damaging and a shock for the spine. So you need to slowly, what we called, stretch it out. So she was in a halo inpatient in West Palm for 28 days. And then on day 29, they did the spine surgery. And that was our life living through that. In order to get Mila prepared, we created this book. Another mom had given me a similar one that she had done for her daughter who was in a halo, and just talked about Mila's squiggly spine and, kind of prepared her for what was going to happen. And the one thing that we were very, very adamant and careful about is we never, ever use a term that we were going to fix her spine. And we made sure everybody in our community knew that, because her spine was not broken and she was not broken. So she did the halo for the 28 days, did the spine surgery. And when they came out to tell us what a success it was, I mean, obviously we were so insanely relieved. Mila wasn't big enough to get something that they call magic rods, which magic rods, you can just go into an appointment and the doctor can use a magnet to lengthen the rod. So it's no surgery at all. But Mila just doesn't have enough girth on her, and so we have to go in and have surgery every 3 to 4 months to lengthen her rods. So we're hoping, our goals have been to get her bigger and stronger. It's a challenge because of, I think, the way that her body interacts with things and stuff, but we've made progress. And then last year she had jaw surgery. It's called jaw distraction surgery. And it was to pull her jaw forward by 3/4 of an inch. And that will help eventually when we are able to get the trach out, because it'll help for breathing and for swallowing. And that was putting in 2 pieces of metal into her jaw. And then a couple days after surgery, we turned those pieces like a millimeter a day, I think. And over the course of 2.5 weeks, it pulled her jaw forward. Wow. And it was horrible. I can't even imagine. It was worse than the spine surgery.
As far as pain?
A pain. And yeah, and she had an infection. So, we're having to clean these areas. My husband's literally holding her down so we can clean an infected site that has metal in it. Ugh. And it was awful. And, it did what it needed to do. And we were going to have to do it. So we just kind of took a deep breath and moved forward, again, very methodically and strategically and stuff with our doctors, but we knew eventually we were going to have to do it. So over the past, I'm not even thinking about her 3 months in the hospital, over the past year and 7 months, Mila's had 7 surgeries.
Wow.
Up until now, you're saying, in the last year and 7 months from now.
Yeah.
Dang. Yeah. Strong little girl.
Yeah. Yeah, she is.
My goodness. So what kind of financial turmoil did this put on your family? I mean, obviously she's so medically complex. Somebody has to be with her at all times. And, when it comes to the whole feeding process, like you were saying about adjusting her jaw, I'm sure she's got medicine she's got to take. How do you guys manage all that?
It's really expensive. When we were getting out of the hospital, I was able to find that, and nobody really knew this, the caseworkers at the hospital, which is just crazy. But I was able to find that she would fall under Medicaid, medically fragile. So our income does not matter. So Mila is covered first by my husband's insurance through work, and then anything that our insurance doesn't cover, that Medicaid program does cover. But that in and of itself is a turmoil. Early last year, we were transferred over to full Medicaid accidentally by Medicaid, and then told that we don't qualify for Medicaid, which we're like, yeah, no kidding. Right. And then so had a whole lapse of service for a month because they made a mistake, because we pay a premium for her Medicaid. It's not it's not a free program for us and stuff. So we're able to get a lot of her medical stuff covered, but we do a lot out of pocket. All of her therapies we pay for out of pocket. And recently, over the past 6 or 7 months, we've been working with a functional medicine team, and they've put her on a whole bunch of different supplements. We've done a bunch of different tests, stool, urine, saliva, all this stuff to really look at the metabolic stuff going on. All of that stuff's out of pocket. Yeah. She goes to a private school. We're fortunate that we're able to provide for her. We also are very fortunate to have the support of my parents. But I can't imagine what people go through.
So were you able to continue working or did you stop working?
I took a step back, and in some ways I'm a consultant, so I can kind of work as much or as little as I want to. The problem with taking a step back is you're not doing business development, which both of you understand as small business owners. So when you're trying to step back in, that makes things a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, I took a real big. So did she. We both took a big step back. We had to pause our businesses for a while.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't have to pause. I had people to help.
Luckily you did. I'm a one-person show.
Employees and stuff that stepped up and took all of it. I mean, I just did the background admin stuff when I could.
But like when I took about 6-7 months off or something like that, and when I dipped my toes back in, I don't know about you, but I got really overwhelmed. And I was like, what would have been like regular or maybe even just slow for somebody else, I was like, hold up, I can't do this.
Yeah.
I just can't.
Well, and it's like some days you're just simply getting done the things you need to get done for them, for Mila, so there wasn't any extra capacity for anything.
Well, because you got to go to this appointment and that appointment. I mean, we did speech therapy, occupational, and physical therapies for outpatient for a year.
And you were up in Orlando.
We were up in Orlando for rehab.
Okay.
So we came home after that and did outpatient for a year. And it was just hard. It was a lot of driving around because they originally started her at the adult center because the social worker up there said that the child center here, the Johns Hopkins, because Johns Hopkins doesn't have a hospital here. We just have the outpatient kind of like arm. And so the doctors will come down here once a month and everything else is overseen by just the regular staff. And they didn't have room. So the only thing that had room was the adult center. But the adult center kept talking to her as if they kept saying a concussion. They only see hip replacements, knee replacements from elderly people for the most part. So they don't have, traumatic brain injury, like a lot of knowledge or a lot of experience with it. So it was very frustrating. And when we went to her follow-up a couple months later with the Johns Hopkins neurosurgeon, he comes down from St. Pete once a month. He was like, no, wait a minute. Why aren't you here at the pediatric, And I said, because when the social worker up there called, you guys didn't have room. He's like, what? We can get, she's my patient. I can get her in. So then they got us in, and that place was wonderful, but could never get us on a regular schedule. So I'm doing speech therapy at 9 a.m., 45 minutes away, 9 a.m., coming back for OT at 3 p.m. And then tomorrow we're going to go do physical therapy, and it was never like, it was multiple days a week. Yeah. You can't work.
No. Well, and even like with our spine surgery, so the Paley Institute has a PT arm to it, and they're fantastic. Like, they're so positive.
That's how this the children's place was.
Yeah, they concentrate on like what Mila can do. I absolutely love them. So when we go for surgeries, we stay a week so she can do PT over there, and they're completely on board because they know that we institute all this stuff at home. But that's a week of staying in West Palm and paying for an Airbnb, and we have to get a 2-bedroom, 2-bath because we bring a nurse with us and to help us with everything. And because somebody has to be with Mila when she sleeps. So Mila is no longer, like, she's not on the vent during the day at all. She's only on the vent at night. We no longer use a feeding pump. We do all bolus feeds because I blend all her food. So that was another new expense. We do all organic. I blend everything, then add supplements, making sure that she has like all of the different 369 oils and the micronutrients and micro minerals. And
you have become an expert at many different things you never expected.
Completely. And
you should be a nutritionist. Help us all out.
Well, and it makes you see the world so differently. And to be honest with you, what we've done from that perspective, working with, so Carla is our go-to person on our functional medicine team. She's made the most difference other than our orthopedic team. And that's not a slight on any of the doctors at all. It's just not necessarily how they're trained. And so, she's really, again, looking at this from a metabolic and cellular level. So one of the tests that came back was that Mila had all this ammonia in her belly. And well, how do you get ammonia? From a breakdown of proteins and meat. Animal proteins have the most ammonia. So she put her on something called a sparga, which is a derivative of asparagus, and it neutralizes it. There is no chance that at any GI appointment, again, bless, right?
Right.
Like, bless. I love her GI doctor, but no point were they going to get there.
Right.
And then all of a sudden we started using Spargo. We started going down on animal protein and up on like lentils and stuff. And meanwhile, did a sensitivity test prior, so I know exactly what her body would be inflamed to. Her belly no longer hurts.
That's amazing.
Right? Like that
Right.
only a functional medicine doctor.
No, I love that realm of
Yeah.
the medical world.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Functional medicine, integrative medicine,
Right.
all the holistic stuff. That's my
Your jam.
my jam.
If I could afford it out of pocket, I would go.
Yeah.
That's all I would take my family to. But
I know.
it's so hard.
Going back-
I have 4
yeah.
kids.
I know.
It's like impossible.
Going back to that financial burden thing. I mean, that's what, when we had a GoFundMe when my son was going through cancer treatment, a lot of that funds not only, paid our bills and paid our, mortgage when my husband was out of work, but a lot of that money went to those extra therapies. It went to, we did a lot of the integrative stuff. We did a lot of chiropractic care. We did a lot. We started doing acupuncture.
Yep.
We went and saw a homeopath. I'm on board with it. And I'm so glad it's made such a difference for her.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And I think like the key thing, because a lot of people, if they don't know much about functional or integrative medicine, they think that it's just like using like plants and herbs and stuff. Like the first thing Carla said was, I want to talk to all your doctors.
Yes, that's how it should be.
Right. Like she's like, we're all a team. And our doctors who talked to her, like our pulmonologist in West Palm Beach, like he couldn't have been more thrilled with everything she had to say.
That's exactly how it should be.
He's like, oh, that's exactly what I think. I think it's nutrition, and I think it's getting her bigger and stronger, and then she'll have the capacity to be off the trach or be off the vents at night. That would be the first step, and then the next step would be capping the trach so that she's completely breathing on her own, and then we can take the trach out. But we also have to wait until she's not having surgeries so much too.
Yeah, because that makes it easier for them.
Correct. It's
There's not a lot of
secure airway.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's how it was with our G tube. We had to have it in. You have to have it in for X amount of time for the stoma to heal.
Sure.
Because of course, as soon as she got it, then I would say about 10 days after she got it, then she was like, "Oh, pudding." She was starting to become interested in food by mouth. But prior to that, there was nothing. She was not communicating. She was not looking you in the eye. She wouldn't open her mouth at all. And I think a lot of that had to do with the way that her neck bent or hit her face or however, because there's still such a huge gray area over what exactly happened. I think her jaw hurt. I think she hurt her jaw somehow.
Sure.
And she wouldn't even open her mouth, wouldn't open her lips, and having your mouth open, intubated
Right.
for a long time after a major accident.
Swallowing is hard. Yeah.
She just wouldn't even refuse to open her mouth. Her lips were completely chapped and dry and just, it was so awful.
Those small things are heartbreaking.
It really is, especially just seeing your kid, like that too. And it was so, ugh. Yeah.
How did this whole journey affect your marriage at all?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has affected us. We worked really hard to come together, but both of us haven't always been the best at that. There are certain periods of time where I was just angry, and he's the easiest person to be angry towards, not at, nothing was his fault or anything, but
Because he's there.
He's there.
He's just the brunt.
He's
of
there.
the
But
brunt of it.
it's an unconditional love between a husband and wife, or it should be.
right.
So it's easy to throw your shit on somebody who's going to love you no matter what.
Or yeah,
Or they're supposed to.
They're supposed
they
to,
will.
right? I mean, if you're comfortable in a relationship, it's super easy to just be like, and you find it, even if it has nothing to do with the reason why you're actually mad, be like, why the fuck are you leaving your socks on the floor again? Like, how many times have I, and you start an argument over socks because you can.
Yeah.
Because you had a shitty day.
Yeah.
But, a shitty day and if you're in a situation where your child's in the hospital, is a much more shitty day than the average Joe. I know, at least in my experience and knowing a lot of other cancer families, in a situation like this, especially with medically complex and you don't really have an exact diagnosis, a lot of the times it can split families apart. So that you guys can get through anything if you guys can survive this, right? Is that how you feel too? 'Cause that's how I felt.
Yeah, I do, especially now. I mean, there's been a lot of ups and downs, and both of us have worked independently to try to grow and expand and be the best person we can be, not only for each other, but for Mila. And that in and of itself is a journey, you know, in the different ways that we've done it. You know, for me, it's spending time being by myself. I've taken a couple trips away to write Mila's story. And, you know, for him, it's in other directions. We've done counseling. We've done numerous different things. So yeah, I feel very strong right now. And I'm glad he is my partner.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever go through a period where you kind of, at least I know I did for myself, but did you ever go through a point where you kind of lost your identity for a while, where you were like, yes. I'm just the medically complex mom. Like, I'm just a robot. I'm here to take care of her, do all the things to ensure that she survives, and I don't even know who I am anymore. And like, how did you come, to a point where you're starting to find yourself again? And are you finding yourself again?
Yeah, I mean, that has probably been one of the hardest things for me. I mean, even before all this, before we moved and I went into consulting, it was a big decision for me to do that because I had built this whole network. I was running these programs and, it was just like, I felt like I was giving something up. I have my master's degree. I've accomplished all of this, and now I'm, taking steps back, or what I felt like were steps back. So it's kind of also like retraining my brain to know that things are not linear. It's not one step to the next. It's not ABC, that we're going to be jumping around. It's more like a jungle gym, as far as our identity and our careers. And at one point, so we've homeschooled Mila since she's been gotten out of the hospital, and I didn't homeschool her. I had tutors and stuff because that's not my field at all. And I was sitting there with other homeschool moms, and they were being very sweet, but made the comment like, oh, it can be hard at first, but just keep going on with it. And I was like, no, you don't understand. Like, I'm a lot for Mila. I'm her nurse, I'm her mom, I'm her caregiver, I cannot be her teacher as well. Right. I'm taking on way too many roles for her and for myself. So yeah, I think over the past probably 7 months or so, I've started to figure out who I am again and feel like I am separate of her, but also her. And, because I was never upset to be Mila's mom. It was that I didn't feel like Bailey anymore.
Right.
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard. I can see you kind of tearing up over there a little bit. It's really hard. I'm right there with you. I'm sure Victoria is too.
Mm-hmm. And then you're kind of mad at yourself because
it almost feels selfish, right?
Yes. You're selfish for wanting time to you.
Yes. Well, and the idea that, people will say children are such blessings, which they are. But when you're doing things like the three of us have, there's a lot of grieving that goes into that. Yes. Grieving the expectations of what you thought parenthood would be, grieving where you thought you would be at this point in your life. And grieving, like we've talked about, is not also a linear process. And right when you think you're like, yes, I'm back, I'm good, something happens and spins you out again. And so it's like you can be upset on so many different levels for so many different things.
Yeah. And even when you were talking about finding yourself and having your identity kind of mushed in with your daughters and trying to kind of separate who's Bailey, I think any mom can identify with that, just even on a basic level. I mean, I felt for years and years I was just a milking cow for my children. I had 4 kids in a 5-year time frame, and I was either pregnant or nursing all the time. And I'm like, who am I? I am nobody. This is all I am to them. And that's okay.
Like a vessel.
That's it. Like, dad was fun. The other siblings were fun. Mom's milk. That's it. And it was really hard for a long time, And now that I'm so far out of nursing my kids, I'm like, oh, I want that back.
I know. Isn't funny, that perspective?
Yeah. I miss it so much. It was always so wonderful. Like, I'm romanticizing everything about it. But man, was it hard. Yeah. It was hard and it was stressful. And I never felt like I couldn't get anybody off of my body. There was times where I was just like, my skin would crawl. I just want to be alone. Like, don't touch me. My poor husband, I'd be like, I've had enough touching today. Like, don't even breathe near me.
Don't look at me.
And don't think about me.
Well, in the past multiple Mother's Days, like the Mother's Day after Mila got out of the hospital, I mean, I just spent the entire Mother's Day in bed because my mom and I were supposed to go to lunch, and I had to call her and say, I simply can't do it. And I spent the day in bed crying because I didn't feel like a mom.
Yeah.
I felt like Mila's a nurse. Like, I couldn't go to a restaurant and watch all of these other moms get celebrated by their perfectly healthy children. And I know that's romanticizing, right? Like, I don't know what that mom has gone through in the past, or what she will go through, or what her kids have gone through, or what they will go through. Like, I get it.
She probably yelled at them in the car on the way there.
Right.
You know.
Right. Like, I get, you know, and I say this, that like your biggest problem is your biggest problem and stuff. And so I understand that, but like, that just was not the day that I was going to be able to be rational and stuff. Yeah. And then the next year, which was last year, she was in a halo in the hospital, and my girlfriend came from Baltimore to help us and be in the hospital with us, and was there over Mother's Day, and we were supposed to go, and got up that morning. I was like, Reen, I can't. Like, and she's like, no problem. We're going to do whatever you want. Let's go to the hospital and spend time with Meals. We did that, and then we went back. Like, I couldn't. This year, couldn't really as well. Maybe this upcoming year will be better. I don't know. I just, it's hard with the medical complexities, because sometimes your identity of mom and nurse feel the same. Yeah.
Well, that's what a lot of people go through when they're, maybe husband has some kind of cancer, or their wife is and they're now the caregiver, or there's a horrible accident. It's a quadriplegic, right? And so the spouse has to now take care of this person, and no longer are they just the spouse. Now they're also nurse. Now they're also, just caretaker in general. So those lines are kind of mushing together, and it becomes very difficult.
And some people can't deal with it.
No, they can't.
They straight up leave.
Well,
it's horrible.
They straight up leave, or, hopefully see that they need to hire out. They need to outsource that nursing care and then only be the spouse, and, I'm happy for you that you do have a nurse come in and help, especially at nighttime, so you can have time alone, reading, be with your husband, something, and still know that she's okay.
Yeah, we're really lucky with the nursing staff that we have had and do have. Like, one of our nurses who we currently have, we've had almost the entire time Mila's been home. And I mean, she started with us a month after, and she's absolutely fantastic. She's like my right hand person. I don't know what I would do without her. She's become family. I trust her immensely. I would leave Mila with her, so we are lucky. But I mean, I also couldn't be that mom that wasn't involved and stuff. So of course, every trach change, unless I'm out of town for work or for something, I'm changing her trach. My husband and I are changing it. The nurse is there, but we're doing it, like I make sure that she has all of her supplies, all of her medications. Like, I'm highly involved in all of that, because that's what you're supposed, I was given the responsibility to take care of her.
And you also need to be up to date on everything all the time, right? Because if you're out of supplies, who's going to order it? You've got to make sure that we're, I get that.
And I feel that mothers are just so amazingly just naturally equipped with that, intuition and ability to step into that caregiver role, of course. But do you ever feel that maybe your past experience and the leadership has really kind of prepared you for this?
Yes, I've thought about that a lot. And I was even talking to my mentor over the past couple months and telling her, I haven't always operated with grace. I've lost it sometimes.
Sure.
So, but everything I've learned, maybe I did all these things to bring me to this point, to be able to navigate the way that we navigate it. We have nursing in our house, so I have to navigate a lot of different personalities who are in our house. We never have privacy. When you think about it, there's always someone in our home. And then dealing with the DME company. We have 2 DME companies dealing with multiple different doctors, specialists, and their personalities and their recommendations and stuff. So really having to put all that together, even when Mila was going into into West Palm for the Halo, I had wrote up an entire thing about her history, where she was at the moment. This is how she's fed. These are the type of nutrients that she gets from vitamins, like that the hospital was to give her under no circumstances was to give her any sort of formula or synthetic vitamins, that we would be responsible for all of that. And I asked them if they could put together a team meeting, because I wanted to make sure that she was going to be getting a continuity of care, that the care that we had at home that we were giving her was brought to the hospital, and that it was not going to disrupt her routine, because we had been making progress,
Right.
and I did not want her to go backwards, especially with having a major surgery.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's
You're a
lot of
badass,
work,
dude.
for sure.
You really
Oh
are.
my God. Because it's so easy to just be like, okay, whew, they're going to be there to take care of it and feed her and deal with all of that. And,
Right.
you know, just
So many people will just be like, you're the expert, you're the doctor,
Yeah.
whatever you say, you know?
I mean, I guess, and I've learned, and again, for any doctors listening, this is not a criticism at all. I've learned that they know what they know because of their experience.
They're an expert in their field.
Yes.
They can't venture outside of that.
No, and their field is not in my home taking care of Mila. And one of the things that we had to not really fight with, but so when Mila was discharged, she had what you call a GJ tube. So there is the G tube, but then a J tube that goes right into the intestine. So it's bypassing the tummy altogether. And she was on a formula. So when I got to the place where I could like think about things, I was like, wait a second, synthetic formula full of sugar and soy. This is not how your body is supposed to process things. So I started just like scouring the internet about how do you do a blended diet. And I found this formula, not a formula, but it's something called the Real Food Blend, and figuring out, can I put it in a J tube? And at one point I was just like, we're going to see.
Yeah.
This is maybe trial and error, and you know, and somebody may think, well, that's a little risky, but a J tube comes out a lot, so that's not an unusual thing. But you know, I mean, I still had to grapple with that. And when I went to the GI, they're like, well, you can't give her a blended food until she stops getting sick. I'm like, she's not going to stop getting sick until I give her blended food. That your body is not meant to digest this at all.
Right.
Yeah.
And we slowly transferred her over, over several weeks. And what do you know? She didn't get sick as often. And then we were using that. And then when I started working with this functional medicine team, Carla's like, you have to go organic. That brand is not organic. And blend your own food. So I started just taking exactly the stuff I'd been giving her and blending it myself, and sick less and less and less. You know,
I have a question. If the GJ tube, that's what it's called, that bypassing the stomach, what about the acid breakdown in the stomach? Because you're putting it right into the small intestine, so it's already bypassing a bodily function to get the food, you know.
Yeah.
You just got to be digested in some way. How does that?
It does. In our experience, it didn't. So we would have to vent her belly. So she'd have all this bile coming out of it, because the bile is there to break down your food.
Right. So how did the food get broken down? It just doesn't?
It just doesn't. It's already, whatever you're putting in is kind of already in a broken down sense.
Right, because it's blended, right? But as far as because I imagine that the function of the bile is not just to break down the food, but it's also to allow your small intestine to start absorbing the nutrients the way that they're supposed to be absorbed. So I was just curious if there was any kind of something you can add to the food to give it mimic a breakdown.
Not to my knowledge, but if I truly do think if you are giving whole foods in a blended scenario, and you're giving those micronutrients and microminerals, that the body is going to do what it needs.
But going straight into the small intestine without that, without that bile breakdown, must go straight into her bloodstream, full on.
It gets absorbed.
That's what I mean. It probably absorbs super well.
Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, so the intestine, I guess the best way to put it, pulsates. Mm-hmm. So the tube easily comes out because it's super problematic. We ended up getting rid of it.
Did they tack her small intestine up to the wall of her in order to keep, because I know that's what they do for the G tube. They tack your stomach up to the wall of your body. So if it comes out, it's easily, you can put it back in and balloon it back out, right?
Yeah.
So I was just curious with the J tube, if that.
No.
How do you get it back in?
So you have to go and they have to
Right.
do it. Not surgically. They can put them under very light anesthesia. Right. But yeah, that's why the GJ isn't like optimal.
Right.
Because it is very finicky.
Yeah.
So we were happy. And then in order just to take that out and put a G tube in, that's super easy. All you do is literally take it out and then put your button in.
Right.
So that's a doctor's visit.
Yeah. So you guys don't feel comfortable doing that on your own with the G tube?
No, we do everything.
The button?
We do everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
They told me that within the first, I think it was the first 2 weeks or something, if it came out, I would need to come back in and they would have to put her under like x-ray to make sure, because the stomach was still
not healed.
Because of her age, they had put these buttons on the side. Almost like, do you remember in school where you would make like, it was like, you know, those spinning wheel things where you can turn it, had that tack in the center, that's prong kind of tack. It was like that inside on either side of the G tube for her stomach. And inside it was like open prongs to get her stomach to then kind of fuse to the wall of her, you know, the other side of her skin. And those buttons were so tight, she got massive infections underneath both of them. And they wanted, when we had left Golisano's to go to the rehab center, there was such an infection because they were probably about the size of a dime on either side. And they were so infected underneath because they were too small. And all the juices are leaking out of the G tube and just getting stuck under those buttons. And you couldn't clean them.
And acid.
I know. And I asked they had general surgery come down and take a look. And she's like, we're very hesitant to cut these off because they were done by another surgeon. And surgeons don't touch other surgeons' work. And I'm like, with all due respect, she has open, gaping sores.
Right.
Like she is in so much pain. And it's just getting worse because the stomach acid. And then we would wrap it. We'd put those like split gauzes around it to keep it. Oh my God, this poor kid. She still scars from those wounds. Just from those wounds. The G-tube scar is not even that big.
Right.
The wounds on the side are huge because of that.
They make it sound like the G-tube's like super easy.
They put a G-tube in for the size of a 3-year-old. The first G-tube.
Why?
It was so pushed into her stomach when she came out of surgery. And they're like, oh, she's just swollen. And then the nurse, you know, when they give them meds, they have to scan their bracelet. And I'm talking within an hour after surgery, they had to give her meds, and they're scanning the bracelet and they're looking. And they're like, what's going on? This isn't her bracelet. It's the bracelet of a 3-year-old little girl. And I'm thinking, because they ended up having to take her back into surgery 48 hours later to give her a bigger stoma for the G-tube, they probably put the wrong G-tube size in based off of whatever was reading on the bracelet. When they scanned it, you know what? I was fuming. I know. I never did anything about it. Never said anything. I just asked periodically, so how's that investigation going about the wrong bracelet and the wrong G-tube? And the nursing staff would be like, what do you mean? Because it's always a new nurse, you know? And I'm like, it's not in the notes or anything. Like nobody has any. She's like, nobody told me about that. It's not even in like morning rounds that were, you would think that they would let me know. Still have no idea what happened. I thought that was odd.
I think one of the most disappointing things, like kind of going back to the leadership thing, is, you know, really been taught to take ownership. And if you make a mistake, especially in the consulting world, like I wouldn't have a client, right? Like I can't just argue with a client that they're wrong all the time and no one would work with me.
No.
So even when I haven't necessarily done anything wrong, it's not arguing. It's just figuring out how to work through the problem. And there's been such a lack of ownership, and we've had several different circumstances where I've had the talk with doctors to say what you did was incorrect, and not letting it go, not because I wanted to argue with them, but like, no, we're staying here until we have come to the conclusion that was not okay, so that there can be a lesson learned with this.
Yeah.
Because my daughter, that's my daughter's life that you're talking about.
Right.
So, I mean, it's just crazy. And I understand that, you know, if they're sitting there taking all this ownership, it opens up to liability.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't say that was my fault.
Right.
You can't say that. Nobody visited me. Nobody followed up with me. I asked multiple times, you know, anytime a new nurse would be on staff, I'm like, oh, hey, and have you, you know, any update? And everybody was like, what are you talking about? Mm-hmm. It's not in the notes. It's not anywhere. And eventually we moved away from Golisano's and went to Orlando. So I just, whatever, let it go at this point. Because they saved her life, right?
Right.
Like, what am I going to... Whatever. What are you going to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because at a certain point, you just got to let stuff go. She's fine.
Yeah.
It didn't cause any damage. You know, let's move on.
Right.
So what does Mila's life look like now?
So Mila is in school. She goes to this small farm school called Acton Academy. And they have chickens and ducks and cats and stuff. And she goes...
I love this.
I have,
it's super
I have
cute.
chickens and backyard cats. I love it.
She could start a school.
Yeah, you should.
No.
It's super cute. So she's able to go Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, because we do different therapies on Wednesday. And she is at grade level, if not beyond grade level. And
so much for those developmental delays. They told you she was going to have an hour after she was born.
Exactly.
I love
such
this.
certainty.
I know. I love this for
well.
you and her. This is fantastic.
She's super smart, super emotionally intelligent. You know, in our house, we talk about things, we apologize for things, we take ownership over things. So, you know, the three of us are constantly, somebody's apologizing to somebody at some point during the day for something they've done, you know. And
I love that, though.
Yeah, and because we all make mistakes and we're human and we're all stressed under different things. So she's my buddy, and she's taught me more than any one person or job or position or anything has. And even though I have gone through a grieving process with, and still do sometimes, I do feel incredibly honored to be her mom. And she's more than her medical complexities. And I always want to make sure when people meet her, talk to her, spend time with her, that's not what we concentrate on. That's part of her identity. I'm not erasing it at all. But she's just Mila too, and that's what's important.
What does her future look like? Do you have any idea? They tell you anything to expect as far as continued surgeries and therapies and things like that?
Yeah, so I mean, our goal is to get her big enough that she can have the magnetic rods in her back. You know, I mean, she's only about 3 feet 1 inch at 7, so she's gonna be a petite person. She's completely like proportional and stuff, but she's, I don't know what size she's gonna get, and because of having spine surgery at such an early age, her spine's only gonna be able to grow so much. Mm-hmm. But you know, we're just gonna keeping her healthy, and eventually when she is able to get the magnetic rods, then we can hopefully then get off of the vent and off of the trach, and her G-tube will probably be there for a bit longer just from a nutritional standpoint, and that's okay. Like, that
you can give her everything that you want to. That's the beauty of a G-tube.
Exactly. She can eat by mouth if she wanted to,
right.
But that's just not my hurdle at the moment and stuff.
Does she eat by mouth at all?
No, not really. She expresses interest here and there, but as we've been kind of figuring out some of these belly issues, she's expressed more interest in hunger. Right?
Yeah,
Like, weird. The body is like functioning the way it's supposed to function, so it's starting to do things that it's supposed to be doing. And
right.
So
even just for taste, like she's not really interested just for taste.
No, but she likes like Parmesan cheese. So she likes things that do have a taste.
That's a sharp taste too for somebody who's not really interested in food. I like Parmesan cheese. I like all cheese.
Yeah, no kidding. And I think one of the things that my husband and I talk about a lot is for so long we've been concentrated on the destination and we forget to enjoy what's happening, and that can be really difficult, especially when you're in midst of crisis, what it feels like all the time. So I am trying to breathe a little bit more and concentrate on what's happening now, and instead of worrying about what's going to happen when she's 8 or 9 or 10 or 20 and stuff, and because things are going to happen whether they're going to happen.
Yep.
And me worrying about that doesn't stop it. And so intellectually I get it, but I'm trying to get there emotionally as well.
That's the hardest part. It's like logically I know all of these things, but like having the follow through with my emotions into like align with my logic is just,
Yeah.
there's a gap.
Yes. Yes.
A lot
it's
of
like
the time.
practice, right? It's like you just like you're retraining yourself, and between all the things that you thought were going to happen, you know, one of the hardest things for me is just people feeling bad for us. You know, social situations can be very awkward for me. Like, I'm great with business and I talk about Mila. I'm very authentic about our journey and stuff. And in personal situations, sometimes it's a little harder because I feel people like doing that head nod and like, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
That's
I'm like,
where
I
our
don't
podcast name came from.
like, I don't need that. Like, I appreciate it. I'm not taking away your compassion, you know, but like, don't feel bad for us, because by you feeling bad for us and for Mila, you're saying there's something wrong with her, and there's nothing wrong with her.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Man.
I know.
I've done that too, though, right? We all have.
Sure.
When
Absolutely.
somebody, you know, tells you something that's hard and you're just like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Because you don't understand what it's like to go through that. And that's tough. But as the person going through it, that's why we came up with the name of this podcast, really, is kind of like, that's all we've heard. Oh my God, I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine. So, you know, it's like if somebody says that to me one more time, but then I say it. I catch myself saying it a lot.
But
especially now.
Don't you feel like when people say stuff like that to you, it's almost like then you try to make them feel better about them feeling bad for
Right,
you?
yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
and you're like,
I can't either.
Yeah.
But it happened. I kind of had to. You know,
Yeah,
really,
I don't know how I did it. I just did.
yeah.
you just do.
Yeah, I've kind of gotten to the point where I just do the,
Yeah.
and then that's awkward for people don't like silences. So,
Right.
Yeah.
you know.
Just sit there, twiddle your thumbs.
Like, what did I say?
Yeah, what do I do? I don't know. Thanks, and just pat him on the head.
right.
Like, make it even more awkward.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did they say anything about like, will her ability to have children when she's older be affected or anything like that?
You know, I have no idea. I'd imagine her size would maybe come into part of that, but I mean, again, like, who knows? No one knows anything.
Well, we have a mutual friend who's also an employee of Victoria's who had major spine surgery, and she has rods in her back, and she actually was able to have 2 kids. But
Yeah, she has golden heart syndrome.
Okay.
So that's where the deafness comes from. She's had 50 jaw surgeries.
Oh my gosh.
All of these things, right? She did. I don't think she had kyphosis. It was full scoliosis. So she had a full S spine, and now I think at 15 she got the rod put in. So she's of average height because she was able to grow to a certain age. But she's a full functioning adult with children. But man, she's the hardest worker. She busts her ass every day.
she's funny as shit too.
Doesn't complain. Ever.
She's awesome.
Yeah, funniest. She's so funny.
Yeah, Mila doesn't complain either. Everything that she goes through, like all her surgeries that she goes through, and the thing that she worries the most is that they'll put too much tape around the IV.
Right.
It's like, your back was just like gone into with a knife, and you're worried. And she literally went to the head of anesthesiologist, so the director of anesthesiology for the entire hospital, and went up to her and said, can you please make sure that they cut and put the littlest amount of tape around my IV as possible? And she's like, we sure will.
Oh,
Why does she only want a little?
She doesn't like when they have to take it off, and it hurts
Oh,
her.
it hurts. Oh my God.
But went
What
to
a
the
sass.
head,
I love this.
and then every doctor who came in, like whether it was a nurse or a different doctor, you know, because multiple doctors on the surgery and stuff, she's like, hey, I just want to she literally said, I want to make sure everyone's on the same page.
she's like you.
She's a leader.
Apple does not fall far from the tree.
I want to make sure everybody's on the same page.
And then she told everybody just a little bit amount, and I was just like, oh my God.
Because it hurts. Meanwhile, she's getting spine surgery.
Correct, right.
That's hilarious.
So cute.
What a sweetie.
I love that.
I love that too. It's kind of like my daughter's got this personality that's going to be so badass when she's older. So badass.
When she's older.
She doesn't take
Keywords.
shit from anybody, but she'll say things, be like, hey, I don't appreciate that. Or, hey, you're being really rude.
Yeah.
You know, and she definitely can be rude too. Don't get me wrong.
Oh,
But
yeah.
she calls you out, and it's really awesome. But she needs to polish it. Like we gotta, like, you know,
Yeah.
really polish that
Yeah.
personality
Like
a little
become
bit
clever.
more. Yeah. But just, you get what you want with how you say things. It's not what you're saying. You can get whatever you want with how you say it.
Yeah. I tell Mila all the time, like, you catch more bees with honey. So
it doesn't matter what you say. You can really shape your life with how you conduct yourself and how you say things and still get your point across, still draw boundaries, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So earlier you had mentioned, and you were trying to like, kind of finding your identity again, and you kind of like would leave and like go out of town. You mentioned writing a book. So can you tell us a little more about the book and what that's all about, please?
Yes. So in order to get ready for Mila's spine surgery, because she was going to be inpatient, again, I had to figure out how to work through that trauma. And, I had been seeing a counselor, so it wasn't like I wasn't actively trying, but I needed to have space to open that up and leave it open. And that couldn't be, then having to go pick up Mila or go take her someplace. I needed a space where I could cry and nap and think and just kind of get lost in all of it. So I went away. My husband went away as well. We went away at separate times. And I just started writing. I really didn't have much of a plan for that, but I started writing, and I just started writing her story and actually our story. So it really concentrates on her and her child. So it's in third person. That felt an easier way to express myself. And but it's about us. It's really not about anybody else. There's, other people who kind of come into it, like my husband, or I talk about like a situation with my mom and my dad during certain hospital experiences, and my niece being there, but they're not primary characters at all. So, and my thought was just to kind of create this archive for Mila. And then as I started writing it, I was very authentic with how I felt, how angry I was, the grieving, the expectations, how hard it is for us as women to express that, because we're supposed to be thankful for the things that we're given and stuff. And I started to think, well, maybe this would help other parents who have children with medical complexities and not feel so alone, because that's ultimately how I felt. There's no support group for what we go through with Mila, and I felt alone all the time. And a book doesn't fix anything for people, but it at least it could be a resource for people. And so I guess I'm probably about 70% done. I mean, I think it's very beautiful because it's really shining on the mom, me, and her ability to be able to process all of this stuff, again, being very authentic, but also about just how beautiful and strong Mila is. And, kind of as we talked about before, we forget a lot of things. Even though we're going through all these crazy traumas, we think, I'm always going to remember this, and then you don't. So, another way just to kind of document so Mila knows what she's gone through and what she's had to endure.
She can look back at this and be like, my gosh, my mom was awesome. Because there's going to be a point with which she's not going to appreciate you.
Sure.
And that's natural and that's normal. And if, she doesn't go through that, I think everybody would be like, something's going on. Right?
Yeah.
Because those teenage years are tough.
Well, and I'm hoping that
they're supposed to try you.
They are.
Because that's development.
And I'm hoping that we can kind of start to put more reasonable expectations or more to be like kinder to mothers, and especially moms who are going through things. It doesn't always have to be medically complex, but that this idea that they have to be a superwoman, and that's tiring.
It's so annoying.
It's exhausting. And like one of the ways I describe to people when we've been continuously going through stuff, I'm like, it is almost like I'm in a boxing ring and I'm being punched, but I don't have respite in between the rounds.
Right.
So eventually I'm not going to get up again, guys. Like that's just the reality, because I'm not magic.
Right.
And we women, moms, put themselves second, third, fourth. And I hope this could also, talking about like self-care and stuff, can help promote that, not just within moms themselves, but their communities, to really support that for them.
You have such a wonderful way with words. I know I told you that before. Like your whole application, I was like, man, this girl really knows how to write well. And then when you said you're writing a book, I'm like,
duh.
Go figure. Yeah. I'm like, I'm so glad because, man, you're awesome.
I'm blushing.
Yeah, you are a little bit. So when the book is out, you're going to come back in.
Yes.
Yeah, promote your book.
Yes.
We're going to promote this book.
Yes.
And we can get some photos of you with it and we'll put it on our website.
Yeah.
And
She's a photographer too.
Yeah.
Well,
she could do your headshots.
I was
Yeah.
thinking, well, one, I need headshots for sure. And then I would really like to do family pictures. I haven't done family pictures in a while. So
What are her interests? What is she like into right now?
she loves unicorns. She loves math. She's really good with math. Loves games. She's very good with like dominoes. She beats everyone.
Yeah.
And this face it game, you have to like get the face to match up to the card. And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter, adult, child, she just like blows them away.
Yeah. That was one of the things that helped my daughter in the hospital because even when you're inpatient, you're really only there for three things: physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy. There's not a lot of...
Then you're waiting around.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Right? Sundays, the whole hospital's closed. There's nothing to do. Once a week, the art therapist comes there and they have a whole art room and they'll do like one little thing every Wednesday night. There's a music guy that'll come around once in a while and sing songs with them. There's like a volunteer reading. There's a volunteer dog, and then they have where the kids can read books or somebody could read books to the dog. All of those things, right? So, but there's so much time in between.
Yeah.
We played so many games, and it was awesome. We played this game called Blink. I had to like reteach her how to play it, and she was really slow. So of course I would go slow too, because I'm not gonna like, come on,
Right.
I'm gonna let her win.
Yeah.
I mean, look what we've just been through. But she started to honestly win. And so then she's like, Mom, I think you're trying to pretend to beat me again. Don't try. I'm like, listen, I'm not trying now.
I'm trying my hardest.
Really?
I promise.
It was really, she loved games. She still loves games.
Tell us when you have any goals in mind and when you expect to be done with your book.
I hope to be done in the next 4 to 6 months.
Awesome.
That is my goal.
Well, we would love to have you back to talk about the book and to kind of give us an update and give you an opportunity to promote it as well. So if anybody wants to learn a little more about your journey and follow Mila, where can they find you?
We are I do an IG page for her. So it's Mila, Sophia, and me. So Mila and then Sofia and me. And, I'm not posting necessarily all the time, but I just post about our journey and the things that she goes through, and hopefully we can be a support for other families.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. And then, if there's other mothers out there that really connect to your story, aside from just the Instagram account, is there another method that anybody can contact you if they wanted to kind of pick your brain or just have some motivation before the book comes out, anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. My email is Bailey, BAILEY, _sausage, SUSIC @gmail. So I'm always here for other parents, moms. I would say a couple years ago, I didn't have that capacity at all. I was just surviving. And, as we've gone through this and been able to do some healing and always continue to be, I'm so happy to help or assist, not help, but like assist other families and other parents.
That's great. And what about business consulting? If somebody wants to reach out to you for that?
Yeah, so I do leadership, so work with organizations and we'll develop women's leadership programs in general, but really kind of the niche with my partner is with women's leadership. We really feel like empowering women, especially at an executive level, is so important for capacity building in communities.
That's fantastic. I love that.
Yeah. So, and we're, I'm currently working, we're kind of seeing where this will go, but, possibly putting together a blended food line for tube-fed people, tube-fed individuals, so children and adults. And this would be something that is organic and fortified with natural minerals and nutrients instead of synthetic vitamins. So there's nothing like that on the market right now. And, as a person who blends themselves, it can be super time consuming.
Yeah.
So developing something that could at least be supplementary to what people do, we're kind we're working through it right now and stuff. So kind of see where that goes. But it would be there to help support the most vulnerable population of our medical community, right? We're feeding them the worst foods and they're the most vulnerable.
When my son was first inpatient, right after he was diagnosed, we were stuck in the hospital for like about 2 weeks. It was actually 12 days because he had a staph infection in addition to the cancer. And he was severely anemic at the time, so they kept him a little longer than they normally would to address the staph infection. But the kid didn't eat, like you were talking about. They say, well, they'll eat when they're hungry. When you're a mother and you're facing that your child won't eat, you're like, something has to be done now. And I remember asking the oncologist, I need you to send me a dietitian, nutritionist, whoever you have on staff, send them here now. I got to figure out what to do for this kid. Because I was expecting maybe he might need a G-tube or something like that. And what was the one thing that she said? And the only thing that she said was Pediasure.
Yeah.
And I wanted to punch her in the face. And I'm like, you went to school for how many years? I know. And the only thing that you can recommend is to give him Pediasure? Get out of my sight.
I know.
Goodbye.
I know.
Yeah.
And I know you mentioned that like at one point your son was like only eating pizza or something and you were like, whatever, like I don't care.
Yeah,
Right?
after we got home, they told me once all the steroids kick in and his appetite comes back, he will latch on to a particular food like it's his last meal.
And you're like,
And
go.
Yes,
right?
and they said
like,
it could be, they will literally pick one meal and that would be it. And it was Papa John's cheese pizza washed down with a glass of milk. And it's all he ate for like a whole
And
month.
the garlic oil.
And with the garlic sauce. And it was funny because one of the Papa John's actually donated a huge like gallon thing of garlic sauce. They were like, just take it.
So cute.
It's
right?
so nice. But in like, and in those situations, you're so happy to give them whatever they want. But I also remember the nutritionist coming in and going, a calorie is a calorie. And like
Yep,
now,
I heard that too.
Now
It's
knowing what
frustrating.
I know, I'm like, no, giving them ice cream and Cool Whip is not
Right.
the same
Well, in the
thing
hospital, they were
as-
coming in and giving him pancakes with,
Right.
with their disgusting base, probably margarine, right? Not real butter, with margarine, and it's just like a frozen
With the fake syrup.
Right.
fake syrup, probably all corn syrup that
Yep.
they're giving him. And when he took a bite of a pancake, I cried.
Yeah.
Because I just wanted him to, like, at that point in my mind, a calorie was a calorie because he wasn't eating anything.
Right.
And
My daughter
before
had
that, I
pudding
was.
in Gatorade. I
Yeah.
was so excited. Take that dye.
Yeah.
I don't care at this point.
Right.
You're eating by mouth.
Yeah.
You're actually interested in putting something in your mouth.
So
Oh my
I love
God.
that. Are you familiar? I think it's Kate's Foods or Kate's
Farm.
Kate's Farm, yeah.
So they have they have an organic line, but they don't fortify with natural supplements. So doing all the market research, there are a couple out there, but either they're not organic or they don't have good fortification.
I love that you are taking this and seeing that there's this need. I really hope that you're able to do something with it. That's amazing.
I did not go into it thinking like this. It was actually doing all of this and working with her team. And Carla's like, you should create something. I'm like, no, I have a lot going on right now.
Give it time.
Yeah, and she kind of like kept talking to me about it, and then the more I thought about it, the more I realized that we are on a precipice. Like when it comes to a food revolution, like things are going to be changing with the way that we eat, and it's not fair that people who don't have the time or the resources or the knowledge then can't give their kids something good too.
Yep.
And that needs to change for them.
You have been awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming into the studio and telling us about Mila's journey. And we wish her all the best. And we hope that we can meet her someday.
Yes. Thank you both for having me. I feel very, very honored to be here and to share.
We feel honored that you're here.
Yes.
You're so smart.
We really enjoyed this time with you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. You can find us at ican'tevenimagine.com, and you can also find our social pages on Instagram at ICEI_podcast or on Facebook at I Can't Even Imagine - a podcast for moms. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.